So hello, I asked the organizers to increase the lighting so that in order to wake you up. I find it really awkward to speak in English and because maybe most of the audience is Romanian. And also, you must know I hate PowerPoint. So I didn't make the presentation in PowerPoint. I used that other software and imported it. And maybe you should hate PowerPoint too. So, did you see the weather outside? Who else here is grateful for not having to go to work today? Okay, so as a designer and facilitator, I really want to know who's in the audience first. So I will come closer and ask, who of you works in a big company? Okay. Who of you works in a consultancy firm or does consultancy by themselves? Okay, and who has a startup or is part of one? Nice, good mix. So, as I said, winter is coming. And not because it's winter outside, but because corporations have started understanding what startups are and are starting to go along on that, that same route and same track. I've been through four big companies, names that you for sure know here in Romania, and I've been part of really big projects. So I was not by myself fortunate enough to handle single-handedly any of those projects. That never happens. So work is always done in a team. So just to be honest here, what I will talk about are experiences that I had in teams of people trying hard not to suck. So I've learned a lot, and I will share with you a lot, and I propose something. Go ahead and ask questions. Raise your hand and ask something, and I will try to be as straightforward in my answers as I can. So basically, I'm a co-founder of a small studio. We're 4 people doing facilitation, design thinking, and UX work here in Romania. We have created a community that's, I think, more than 1,000 people active enough and interested enough in design thinking, and also some other types of events. And I've started this 1 year ago, along with my work in a company. So, but I quit, and here I am, I think in my 4th month of entrepreneurship. It's consultancy work, so it's facilitation work, and it's not necessarily product work. But I worked on lots of products, and I will tell you some things about them now. So, I must say I'm not a graphic designer, and I'm not a user interface designer. I used to call myself a product manager, then a UX designer, but as products move along and change to adapt to the market, I also change, and I try to improve myself. So I will also share some reflection about how you should always move and not stop. So, what is service design? Does anyone know what it is? Because I cannot define it. The definitions everywhere are written by scholars, people in academia, and they've been trying to take over that setup and definition, and they're the ones talking about it. In companies and in startups, people usually talk about UX, but they do a lot of confusion mixing UX work with UI design work or code. Also, they talk a lot about products and product design and product marketing. So I think this definition is better, and I think it brings a lot of change in the perspective it brings. It brings a lot of weight and emotion to this mix that we all have to understand. So, when I was in the university, I had to work. I come from a really poor family in a city in Moldova, and I really had to work my ass off. So I got hired in a telecom company, answering calls in a call center. That meant having something like this in my ear for 8 hours and getting somewhere around 24 calls an hour, 8 hours a day, 21 days a month. That's a lot of people to talk to. So I learned a lot. I really loved doing that, and I think it was really it impacted my growth and personal development, because I encountered some really strange situations and people. One of them I will tell you about today. I was doing a night shift because I was during session and had to take exams. So I went to the office by myself. Only other 2 colleagues were working that night with me, and I had to take calls from hundreds of people during the night. Has anyone worked in a call center? Do you know how it is? They measure everything. So back then, they had real-time analytics. So they had this huge display where you could see how many people we had lined up waiting to talk to you. And there were hundreds during the night. I felt like being a really important person, which I wasn't. And then you could actually see a red number with the waiting time. How much each of them had to wait in order to talk to you. Most of those people didn't call because they were bored or because they wanted to make jokes. They called because they had to. It was really important to them. So the number of people waiting to talk to me, the number of minutes they had to wait, usually there were tens of minutes, and the average call duration. So the set of KPIs I used to have in front of me throughout the night, keeping me really awake. One night, I got a call from a really young kid who was crying. This kid had fallen into a hole in the ground near his village. He didn't have money on his prepaid card to call anyone else. And he asked me to call his mother in order to go and recover him from there. And honestly, I was blocked. I didn't know what to do. There were no procedures for something like that. What should I do? Should I call someone else, try to wake people up in the middle of the night while hundreds of people were waiting? I asked him to call 911. Yeah. So, and what happened was that he said, I made some jokes with my friends and they blocked my number. And in my mind back then, something shifted because I understood that the impact and responsibility a change like this does and how it affects people. So I want you to remember the last time you felt confused or lost or scared while using a product or service. And keep that in mind for a minute, because that's empathy with your users. Not long after that, I moved to a small team of 5. It was the team handling data calls, mobile data. There was no 3G yet. We were only 5 people, and all our procedures were on paper. So I think the first interface design projects that I ever did was in a team of geeks from the call center who wanted to create like this information database of procedures. It was called WiseNet. I don't know if you see the name there. It was not that wise. So it was a bunch of HTML files with a search box. The thing is, we all stood during our break time and after work to really create this. We were really passionate about what we should put there. And everyone said, just build an internal Google. Yeah, so have a search engine, an information database, and let everyone search. We did that, but we also wanted to have everything, a dashboard, lots of functionality. Everyone was really happy to be able to contribute and suggest features. And we created a few mock-ups in PowerPoint and Paint, because we didn't have any software back then. And we started showing them to our colleagues. We were really lucky to have our first customers at hand. And what we understood was that they wouldn't know how to use it. See, the thing is, there's a little difference between searching for information that you don't know about and searching for information that you've already seen at some point in time. Using a simple search box was not enough because they knew how those procedures looked like, and what they expected was something closer to a blog, a news website, and so on. So we saw that they didn't understand any of the concepts that we sent after hours of work. So what we did was we started asking them what applications they use. And when do they use them? And what we found out was that most of them were using Google to search for really quick information about stuff they didn't know about. But when they wanted to search for something they knew about, they searched in their email addresses. They kept sending emails to themselves or searching for information they got in emails from someone else. Guess what? Most of them used Yahoo Mail back then. I think more than 60% of people used the Yahoo Mail back in that time. Who else used Yahoo Mail? Keep your hands up, the ones who are still using it. Wow, okay, you shouldn't. So, what we found out is that it was familiar to them to copy the structure of an interface. Not the interface itself, but the metaphor, the visual metaphor of having a timeline, like Facebook does today. Email has been doing this for a while. And the search box on top, and categories. That's what people were expecting. They kept their procedures written by them, by their hand, in their Outlook inbox, grouped like that. So why create a really different interface? So always design for something that's familiar to people. Don't try to be too creative. Don't be too boring, but don't get that creative. Don't change what they expect. And actually, don't wait until you show the first ideas to your customers. Show them early, so that you, not in order to validate your idea. I hear that bullshit all the time. So show them in order to kill the bad ideas first. If you have an idea, if you wake up dreaming about an app or a website or a SAS, whatever else, draw it, show it to someone, beg for them to kill the idea if it's bad. Yep. So I kept seeing this all the time. Broken experiences. So people suffering because someone didn't do their job correctly or completely. And I kept asking myself, dude, who created this? The product managers, they said. So I went on to become a product manager. I applied to the position, and I got into the product division. It was the devices team. It was 2008, the beginning of 2008, and this team of 4 was in charge of handling discussions with the device manufacturers. And so I was the middleman. I was the one seeing the product roadmap for all the smartphone, tablet, and netbook manufacturers for 1 year or 2 years ahead. What happened back then was that in order to get a device to the customer, you had to understand what the customer wants and when it wants it. Like any smart company, this company really understood the customer life cycle and really managed it correctly. What happens today in software as a service happened long ago in telecom. So I was in charge of these babies. I was having discussions with these the product device manufacturers, and they kept creating new devices all the time, like they do fridges or I don't know, any other device that you would put in a kitchen or in an apartment. The negotiation was really complex. I will not get into that now, but it took months for one device to get the correct features, to function correctly, and to reach the customer. So what the company does was see how many customers end their year of contract or their 2 years of contract, and are aware of the profiles of the customers. And then they watch their competitors and they watch what manufacturers do. Because that's an ecosystem, that's a complex system serving people for their communication needs. So these teams were always aware. I had colleagues really good at understanding what every group of customer wanted and when they wanted it. So for example, I had discussions with these bad guys and understood that they had one account person. Yeah? Each of them had one sales guy who was measured, so their success was measured in the number of devices they sold in to the telecom company. And the telecom company repackaged that with, let's say, a prepaid card or a subscription, discounted it, and sold it to the customers. The problem with that was that you got piles and piles and piles of devices. And those devices had to be sold out in order to refresh, to replenish the stock. But their salespeople were successful in their terms, because what they were measuring actually was the sell-in rate, not the sell-out rate to the customer. And then Apple came in. In August 2008, the first iPhone was launched in Romania, and I was lucky enough to be part of that. And what happened was they launched a device 1 year before, and when the telecom companies approached Steve Jobs and asked him if they wanted to sell through the companies, through the telecom companies, he said, "Well, we'll think about it. Okay, send us some devices to test. We want to see it first, to test it, and then to send it to the market." No, we won't do that. And what they did was, I had discussions with the contacts people in BlackBerry and Nokia, who were saying that there are rumors that Apple traveled the world to talk directly to customers, test software, test interfaces, 2 years up front. So what they did was they did not consider the telecom companies as the bottleneck. They recognized the end user as their customer. What happened was that Nokia, in order to sell one device in one country, had to produce usually at least 3 variants, different variants for that device with different hardware, different software for the different telecom companies. So there was complexity added on top because everyone wanted something different. I was the one who was looking to the list of pre-installed applications by the manufacturers, and I was asking them, please remove this one, and replace it with this one, and so on. Sorry for that. So what happened was that Apple really simplified things for themselves. They didn't want to create that much complexity in their work, so they did that by reconsidering who the customer really is. What they started counting was how many devices were activated by the end user after they were sold, in what network, and so on. They stopped counting how many devices they sold in to the telecom companies. And that, in less than 1 year, changed the entire market and changed the way we use applications and software today on our smartphones. So always be careful on what you call success and how you measure it. And always talk directly to your customers. Don't hire an agency to create empathy for you. Don't hire an agency to present results or do that, but also have some discussions with your customers directly yourself. Well, there was so many applications and so many discussions with really bright people. It was really impossible to know how this application market was going to develop, but there was something there. So I changed positions. I went into the digital team and started working on the first Orange branded applications, and it was really, really intense and interesting. But something kept on happening. Unfortunately, that's somehow repaired in most companies now, but back then it was a huge learning for us to understand the new disease that software got. Everyone wanted something new, lots of features. Everyone got enthusiastic about technology and new features, and with good intention, they proposed those around the table, and everyone accepted them. So we started getting feature-rich applications, and then there was a lot of work to simplify and to break down the complexity of them. So calculate the cost of that. No one really does nowadays. How much does it cost to you to create too many features, to add something on top on each software that you create? So I was headhunted by ING and moved to the bank to work on the ING Home Bank and ING Bazaar apps, and I was abruptly put into an agile team. So I was not anymore in a team with other product managers or other marketeers. I was in a team with software developers this time. So my role was to translate the needs from the business into specifications and to actually understand the slang of software developers. So I noticed something else. There's a bug that we all have that's never fixed. It's called sunk cost bias. Who's an economist? So the sunk cost bias happens when you realize you're in a really long relationship that doesn't work, and you're afraid to break it because you've invested too much in it. Who has seen that happening? Okay, so that happens with personal relationships. It happens with jobs and roles in companies, and it happens a lot with products and services that we create. So, because people were pushing forward features all the time, and they were working hard for that, investing a lot of time and effort, they really cared about their product. People there were in love with what they had created. It was really hard to change anything. Nevertheless, I was the first guy to ever be called UX in that bank, so I had the the challenge to convince everyone that we should trim and simplify. So while doing that, I realized that you have to be a bit detached and not get really involved in how it looks, but get involved in how you do things. So care more about the process than the features. So that's a bit different from what you hear from these other guys who are speaking at startup conferences. Product thinking versus focus on process and experience. Because usually when you fall in love with your product, it's really hard to change. So at one point, I was helping my colleagues working on the ATMs upgrade the hardware or software. I was barely a consultant in the team, but I didn't understand a thing about ATMs, I realized. So I had to read a lot of technical work, but also I went on to observe people while they were pulling cash out of the machines, not actually seeing what they type in, but so you know the bank offices, they had like armchairs. I sat in one, pretended I was waiting, and took notes. What I realized was that every time an ATM was too silent, so there was a new ATM model which was too silent, for example, people didn't hear the sound when the ATM counts the money. What they did was they pulled the money out and started counting them. They didn't do that when the ATM had the sound. So it was a matter of the metal box being closed and being in front of the ATM or back. And also, the same thing happened with the digital interface of the ATM. When it was too advanced and too flashy, people were saying in interviews, yes, that looks beautiful, it's gorgeous, it's what you should do. But when they were actually interacting with the thing, they said, okay, they had a hesitation, and then they took 1 or 2 steps back, looked around to see if the machine is what they expected, if it's not a fake one, because they didn't expect the cash machine to be fast, to be technologically enhanced, or to have really high-end features. When we showed them the pictures or videos taken with the camera inside the same room, they said, "Yeah, but I should be worried when I don't hear the money count, because I didn't hear it count. How could I know that they counted correctly? Or it was too fast. It couldn't possibly have had the correct count or the consultation of my account." So people actually were hesitating when they met new technology. They didn't want new technology. They wanted the delays. They wanted everything to be trimmed down and simplified. I will hurry up. Then, as I said, don't let anyone else create empathy for you. Just observe and then ask, and try to understand what the basic expectations that people don't talk about are. Because every time you ask people, they will say something that makes them desirable to you or to anyone else around. Usually they will not open themselves up, but they will say something about their problems if you really listen and really suspend your position as an expert and really look at them with curious eyes like a child. So the basic expectations are there. You don't get to pick what they are. You learn about them when you fail, usually. So let's say that you enter a hotel room and there's a bathroom inside the hotel room. If you had a number or let's say, if you could give it 5 stars or 1 star, how many stars would you give that hotel for putting a bathroom in your own room? 5 stars? So usually people expect that. You don't get to talk about the bathroom in your hotel room. If you're there with colleagues, you don't start a conversation over dinner. Hey, how's the bathroom? Did you like it? They will see the bathroom, notice it, and talk about it only if it happens to wow them, to have something that they didn't expect, or to stop working. So if it stops working, if you don't meet basic expectations, then people start talking. So when you start talking with people, listen to those who have a say, who actually put a lot of emotion in being unsatisfied or unhappy with the product or service, and listen to those who are specialized, who are happy, because those are the ones who have a thing to say. The other ones are not really aware that the basic expectations are met. So we have the Romanian saying cireașa de pe tort, and also the bombona de pe colivă. So the icing on the cake is the wow part. The wow part is when you enter the hotel room, you see the bathroom there, check, you have the bathroom, you see the bed, and then on your pillow you have a candy. Are you happy because you see the candy there? Of course. Is it a surprise? Most of the times, yes. Did it cost a lot? No, it's really cheap. But what happens if you don't have the bathroom, if there is no bed, but you have the pillow there on the floor, and on the pillow there's a candy? Yeah, you don't eat it. You go directly to make a complaint, and then what happens is that expectations break, and when expectations break, a lot of trust breaks. And when trust breaks, it's really hard to repair it. So what we did in a previous project, I was working with an energy company. We went around the country with a specialist team, so engineers, marketing people. I know, 2 minutes. And we had direct conversations with customers, with real customers. So people who were actually handling teams of engineers and experts had the occasion to talk to their customers directly. And they were engineers, right? So they kept thinking about how the process should work, how the devices should work. But when they saw the people and understood that it took months or years to connect directly to the energy network, and they had people crying in front of them, young mothers with young children who wanted to move to their new home after investing a lot and building a home for 2 years, really cried in front of them, and that changed them profoundly. So it changed how they interacted as a team, and it's really brought empathy in. Of course, you need an expert to help you coordinate that. Of course, you need an agency to do the quantitative research. But you should always have your team get physical contact and eyesight contact in the same room with their customers, because that's where emotion lies. Did you ever think that the human communication has like a pipeline, bandwidth? If you send a text message to someone, then you send 1 kilobyte. The other person does a lot of effort to reconstruct the context. And then when you send them an image or video, then they do less effort in order to rebuild the context and environment and what you wanted to say. But then when you're in front of someone, you have all this energy flow, the voice, the eyesight, and also the chemicals that are flowing around us, and we're not aware about them. And so your subconscious will download terabytes of information without you knowing, and after 5 or 6 or 7 conversations with the same type of people on the same topic, you will start hearing patterns. So that's what you use in order to have this whole experience framed as a movie. So you have scenes like in a movie where your hero, the customer, will pass through that movie and interact with actors, your salespeople or customer support, for example, in their context, so you will understand the context, and in each moment of their passing through that experience, you will be able to draw how the emotion evolves. And that's where you have to pay more attention when the energy or emotion drops, when they're disappointed by you. So you zoom in and you understand each step that they do correctly in order to fix things. So just think it's an X-ray of the experience, and you look at every little bone in the skeleton of the experience you provide in order to see where the fractures are. So be grateful for bad feedback, and I will be grateful if you give me bad feedback after this. And thank you. Sorry I took so long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.